Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back. November 17th. It's almost time for Thanksgiving, and Peter might be thankful we're finally going to wrap up the story of Esther. Or you're thankful about food, huh? Lots of bamboo at your table. We are on the final chapter. There's 2 chapters left in Esther, but the last chapter only has 3 verses. So we are going to combine chapter 9 and chapter 10 and wrap it up today. And you might be thinking like I was as I was reading through the story, what's left to tell? Well, boys and girls, we didn't get to that 13th day of the 12th month yet to find out what's going to happen with the Jews, and that's what's going to take place in today's story. Chapter 9, verse 1. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them and hated them. Verse 2. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all the people. So the day comes, and there are some people who don't like the Jews because they're living in their land, and they're like, yes, this is our day. Well, it has been flipped, remember, and the Jews can fight back, and fear strikes these people. They're afraid. Why would they be afraid? Well, boys and girls, that's right, because of God. Their leader, Haman, has been killed. Okay, so the person who is leading this revolt is gone, and they have a fear and a respect, although they may not say it that way, for God and God's power and the way that he's working in the lives of the Jews. Verse 3 tells us that the rulers of the provinces actually assist the Jews. They help the Jews. Verse number 4, for Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Boys and girls, he did what was right, and God was blessing him. God rewards those who do what's right and follow him. That reward isn't always position. We see that in the life of Mordecai. He's getting a higher up position. The rewards don't always look the same for everyone. Just because you do what's right doesn't mean you're going to get to be a leader or a boss. But in this case, the example we're given is God is blessing Mordecai for obeying and doing what's right, staying faithful to God. We see him getting this power and position. So verse number 5, thus the Jews smote all their enemies, and with the stroke of the sword and slaughter and destruction, and did that which they would unto those that hated them. Sorry, guys, felt like I was getting tongue twisted on that. But the Jews destroyed those who came after them. It goes on to tell us that 500 men were killed. Also the 10 sons of Haman. We had mentioned, boys and girls, that our sin affects more than just us. I had mentioned that Haman's sin of pride and selfishness was going to affect more than just him. And now we see his 10 sons are killed as well. Verse number 5. I read verse 5. I'm sorry, boys and girls. Verse 10. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil they laid not their hand. Verse 11, on that day the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. So they come before the king and they tell him how many have been killed. The king tells Esther, kind of gives a report to her that 500 men had died, and also the 10 sons of Haman. I found it interesting as I was reading, as he's giving this report back, he says to Esther, what else do you want me to do? These 500 men have been killed, the 10 sons of Haman. What else can I do for you? What other request? Verse 13, then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also, according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. Now, the 10 sons were already dead. I went and did some research on that. I was trying to figure out, did they kind of back up in the story? But they were already dead. So the 10 sons, though, their bodies get hung on the gallows kind of as a picture of don't mess with the Jews. God's going to protect the Jews. He's going to take care of them. The king grants what Esther asks. The king commands that it be done. The Jews feasted and rested after they defeated the enemies. This feast is the Feast of Purim, and it was to help them remember what God had done for them, how God had spared their lives. He wanted it as a memorial, something they celebrated yearly, the deliverance that God had given them. Do you remember the good things that God has done for you? Do you write them down? Do you journal it so you can remember the good things God has done for you? Sometimes that's big things, boys and girls. Sometimes that's small things. Like I lost something this past week. And amidst fretting about it, the Lord blessed me with a 12-pack of Coke. And I was like, wow, thank you, Lord. And then a few hours later, the thing I had lost got found. And it was kind of like the Lord was saying, stop worrying, just try. I know, Peter, I worry a lot. God was saying, just trust me, don't worry. And here's a good gift for you. Boys and girls, it's not always something tangible either. Those two examples are something I could see. But sometimes God blesses us, maybe not in a tangible way. But do you remember to tell people when God does something good for you? Are you excited to tell someone how God's working, how he's blessing, how he's taking care of you? One thing I'm going to close with, boys and girls, and we're going to end up with the book of Esther. That's right, Peter. I told Peter I had to remember this is how I wanted to end. In Esther chapter 10, verse 3, and then we'll close out the book. For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. So much turmoil ends with peace because they obeyed. See you next week, boys and girls.